Liberation Day is what Trump is calling it.
Baby. Yeah.
What does that entail, Pav?
Well, it involves a movie, lots of spaceships, Will Smith.
That's Independence Day,
Oh,
mate.
sorry.
Come on, mate. That's from your era. You should know that.
Yeah, we've got the reciprocal tariffs coming into effect. So a lot of people may have kind of like skipped over this, don't want to spend too much time on it, know that it's been obviously making the markets bleed. I mean, we've seen the first quarter of 2025 results, even in the equity markets, almost a 5% drawdown. The last time we had that was back in 2022 when they were introducing rate hikes and quantitative tightening. The economy was like, it was done. Inflation was too high. So just really let that sink in. Like what we're going through right now isn't just like a small bump in the road. But this reciprocal tariffs, it's a big piece, right? And
break it down.
We're going to break
what
down
is it?
why. So tariffs, essentially at the end of the day, all they are is a tax that's applied by either side of either country. So you got producers and you have consumers. So let's take in this example, the US, largest consumer base in the world. They're using and buying lots and lots of stuff, right? And basically the whole world wants to sell to them. So what Trump is basically saying is, okay, well, if you want to come and sell to the US, you're going to have to pay us an upfront tax. Basically, that's all it is. It's an entry fee into the greatest consumer base in the world. So tariffs go both ways. It can be paid by the consumer as well as by the producer. So when we're talking reciprocal, Trump and his administration are basically saying, hey, look, what we're paying to you, we just want the same received on our end. So it is, again, at the same time, very debatable on what effect it's going to have long-term in the market. It is going to affect GDP, which is just basically growth across a lot of these countries. Likely will result in increasing inflation over time. Short term, that may not be seen right away or the case. But again, while we don't know what impact it might have, medium, long term is probably going to be good for US manufacturing specifically because it's going to force a lot of things again to come back onshore.
Yeah. Whereas
in the past, a lot of companies may have gone and diverted a lot of their manufacturing offshore, reduced their cost base. As a result, if we look at some of the more macro factors and how they're correlated with, even the markets in crypto, when the US manufacturing sector has seen growth, that has resulted in positive price appreciation for Bitcoin, not because they're tied at the hip and, one equals the other. It's more the economic policy that's enacting when the US manufacturing sector is growing has always benefited Bitcoin in the past.
Okay.
So there is like that caveat to it as well. So while we know what the short term may not bring, we have seen the impacts of what uncertainty does. We've kind of seen, I guess, the only other recent thing that we've seen that's similar in terms of instability globally, geopolitically, has been, the conflict at Gaza. You could even stretch back to as far as Russia-Ukraine kicking off, like that's still going. These sort of events, markets tend to go risk off until there's clarity. Right, and the market needs to get over this date, so then be able for us to sort of look forward and see, okay, well now we know the facts. What's the market going to do next, right? Like, I think that's the exciting bit for us. Like, we've just been in this waiting limbo since the presidency started and this whole tariff thing kicked off in February, start of February.
Yeah. And I suppose like people will be wondering like, okay, but like what is going to impact the crypto market? So there's like a few outcomes that we can expect. So I think the first part is whether they're going to be sweeping or targeted.
Yep.
So targeted is where they're going to target certain countries. I think, what's his name? So Scott Bessent, who's the Treasury Secretary, has labelled a certain group of countries the Dirty 15, which is, I don't know about that
notorious
name, but that would be referring to like the biggest sort of consumers of, or the biggest
producers,
likely
the producers.
Yeah, producers.
They would say that they've got an unfair advantage selling to their users.
Yeah, so like they're benefiting the most from like American imports. So like the Dirty 15, they haven't actually come out with what they are, but you can probably assume it's countries like China, Mexico, Vietnam, Taiwan, Japan, those sort of countries.
Yep.
But I guess so I think a sweeping reciprocal tariff would be short-term bearish for crypto, but if it's more targeted, we might see some more like upside volatility. And then the other thing is if it's going to be effective immediately or if it's going to, take place in a couple of weeks. I think if it's effective immediately, that's probably short-term bearish for crypto as opposed to like, a set date in a couple of weeks time, even a month's time.
Yep.
We might see some more upside for crypto, but then obviously that is a very short-term view of it. So they're the two sort of things you want to look at. So targeted versus sweeping and effective immediately versus, in a couple of weeks time. So that's what we'll be keeping an eye out for. But what else? Like how else could this impact the crypto market?
like everyone talks about global liquidity in M2, right? I mean, there is a slight chance that the US may not need to, print its way out of this current sort of lull that it's in because the rest of the world will be doing more of the heavy lifting for it. So we might find that general indicators that we look to sort of as a precursor to, hey, when this moves, the market moves, those sort of correlations might break. And that's just kind of everyone's job after the fact, kind of look at, what's correlation, what's causation? Like, what have we seen move and shift in the market that's now resulting in risk on assets doing well? And again, we might just see growth globally and not so much in the US, but that's still good for Bitcoin because there's been a very heavy emphasis on the US has to do well for Bitcoin to do well or crypto to do well. So I kind of think, if we look at the facts like China, even Europe, like they're seeing growth, China and specifically seeing too much deflationary activity. So like they need reasons to make more, like to stimulate, right? So if anything, once everyone knows what the chessboard looks like after this, I feel like everyone's going to be more comfortable, hopefully, is what I'm anticipating, essentially providing that liquidity injection to the market. We see lots and lots of stimulus. That helps our markets start to get a bit of movement.
Okay, but you talk about inflation, and inflation is something that we've struggled with for a couple of years now, and why the markets have been, we've essentially had a recession a couple of years ago, and markets have been struggling to perform. Obviously, now we've come out of that, but bit uncertain right now. Like, what does short-term inflation that you're sort of saying? How will that impact the markets? Are we going to continue to see like high interest rates, which will therefore mean risk on markets like crypto are gonna suffer?
It's hard to say from here, right? But like definitely, if the cost of goods to consume we're talking again specifically US because these tariffs are for the US consumer, well, they'll affect the US consumer at the end. It'll cost them more to access what they want to access, right? So at the end of the day, over time, like their cost base should increase, theoretically speaking. The only offset you could see potentially for inflation is if just other general goods, costs come down. Like, again, this is just waiting for the dust to settle. They keep spruiking about reducing income taxes in the US, which obviously will have an offset against what people are paying for goods in their own country. But we don't know. Like, we just need time, essentially, to understand what it's going to mean. But in the past, like, this is not like a novel thing. It has generally resulted in inflation being more persistent, but it may not be in a major way. I wouldn't say it's going to be any worse. Well, it's hard to say from here again, but like we just went through a huge inflation event, right? Like COVID printed however much percent of the world's money. That's slowly being sort of pulled out through the market, through certain market operations. But I mean, we just went through that, so I can't see it being anything like that.
Yeah, so it's not going to be anything near that. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess the main point to take away from that is, as soon as you listen to this, make sure you jump online and see what the actual outcome is of that.
Yep.
Like with Trump, anything's it's always expect the unexpected. So yeah,
and that could be surprise good news too.
Could be. Yeah. Could be.
When by good news, it's him never saying the word tariff again.
So yeah, if you have a risk appetite, you might say, okay, well, I'm expecting, I'm happy to take that risk if I'm expecting some, more targeted tariffs that might take effect, a couple of weeks from now, which might have a positive impact from the market. But yeah, obviously you take on that risk because we don't really know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But I think at this point in time, it just sort of like, from a crypto perspective, just sort of showcases how important Bitcoin is in your portfolio, because Bitcoin retains its value so much better than some of those altcoins. So altcoins will obviously outperform Bitcoin in a bull market, but times like this,
conditions,
like Bitcoin is just super strong. So
100%.